Congratulations! You have completed the first reading and all of the skill lessons for Franz Kafka's The Refusal. And now you're ready for the culminating task, a close reading writing response. Since this is your first one, I want to talk you through a few things, but let's begin with our learning objective and tasks. Here's the learning objective. After engaging in a close reading and discussion of The Refusal, students will write a short response that explains how the story's historical setting contributes to the creation of complex yet believable characters. And here are our tasks. First, complete the vocabulary drag and drop to check your understanding of the words from this module. You already did this with these words on your first read, so this should be pretty easy, and you don't need to write your own sentences. Next, take a few minutes to review the text again, along with your annotations and comments. It might have been a few days since you've read this story, so it might be a good idea to give yourself a refresher. And if you made good annotations and comments, then you won't have to reread the whole thing. Next, watch the Study Sync TV video on tab 3. Now, this is a longer video than what you've watched before, but I think it's worthwhile. It models a discussion about the story between students, and I think it can really help with comprehending the story if it has been confusing for you. Further, what they're discussing is helpful for responding to the prompt. Now that you've done those things, it's time for you to start writing. Before you get started, it might be helpful to discuss the prompt with a partner or in your table group. But let me give you a few tips just to get you going. The writing prompt states, how does the author use the historical setting to create complex yet believable characters? Choose one or two characters to focus on and use evidence from the text to support your response. Okay, so let's break this down. The first thing the prompt tells you is to think about what you know about the story's setting, where it's located, time frame if it gave us that information, and what the situation is, what the historical situation is. If you watched the Study Sync TV video on tab 3, they talk about this a lot. The next thing the prompt tells you to do is to write about how the setting creates complex yet believable characters. Think about what you learned in the skill lesson about complex characters and what makes a character complex. The next part of the prompt says choose one or two characters to focus on. Well, you're in luck here because this story has a really small cast list. The villagers and the government officials are pretty static characters, not a lot of insight into them. So that kind of rules them out. Think about the narrator of the story and whether there are any other characters who seem to have some complex traits. And finally, the prompt says to use evidence from the text to support your response. This is critical. Don't just write a short answer with your opinion. Back up your thoughts by quoting from and using specific details from the story. There is a split screen button right above this writing prompt that you can use to put the story side by side with the writing box. And that'll make it a lot easier for you to be able to pull quotes over or to be able to paraphrase details from the story. Try to aim for at least 300 words in your response, which should be about 2 or 3 paragraphs. And it's helpful to follow the RACE pattern. RACE stands for restate the question, answer the question, cite evidence from the story to support your answer, and finally, explain the evidence that you cited. This is a really good pattern to remember, so you might want to pause the video and write this down in your notebook. Finally, before you submit your response, you might want to click the Review with Write Precise button at the bottom of the screen. This will give you instant feedback about your response and offer suggestions for improvement. In my experience, students who revise their responses using the Write Precise suggestions tend to score significantly higher. And on that note, it's always a good idea to look at the grading rubric before you submit, just to make sure that you've hit all the expectations. You can find that at the top of the page. Okay, that's about it. Good luck with this close reading writing response. And while I can't provide your response for you, I am happy to clarify any points that are confusing about the rubric or the prompt. So feel free to talk to me.